All right, let's now shift our attention to South America, where Argentina's Peronists have swept back into power on Sunday, ousting the conservative president Mauricio Macri in an election result that shifts the Latin America's third largest economy firmly back towards the left after it was battered by an economic crisis. The Peronist Alberto Fernandez had 47.79% of the vote, ahead of Macri's 40.71%. with more than 90% of the ballots having been counted on Sunday night, putting the centre-left challenger over the 45% threshold to avoid a runoff and win the election outright. And Mauricio Macri, speaking at his election rally, conceded defeat and congratulated Fernandez.
Quiero felicitar al presidente electo Alberto Fernandez. Acabo de hablar con él por la gran elección que han hecho. Lo invité mañana a desayunar a la Rosada porque tiene que empezar un periodo de transición.
And Fernandez, the 60-year-old professor of law, had nearly about 48% of the votes after 94% of the votes had been counted, with centre-right incumbent Mauricio Macri trailing at 40.53%. Now, the Interior Ministry has said that the turnout in Sunday's election was over 80% after a campaign dominated by the crippling economic crisis affecting the Latin American country. Now, Macri had called for a massive turnout, which analysts saw as his main hope of closing a large opinion poll deficit on Fernandez and forcing a second-round runoff. Meanwhile, the demonstrations in Lebanon have entered into their second week, and there seems to be nothing that appears that will stop the people of Lebanon at this point of time. The protesters formed a human chain throughout the night, pushing for a wave of retaliation against the political leaders. Demonstrators also joined hands from Tripoli to Tyre, a 170-kilometer-long human chain running through the nerve center of the protests, Beirut. The people from all sections of the society flooded the streets of Lebanon, accusing the ruling elite of misusing state funds for personal gain. And also the famous Lebanese composer and singer Marcel Khalife has also marched along with the protesters. Schools and businesses have shut their doors while roads remain blocked across the country. The continuous efforts by the army to persuade the protesters to unblock the roads have failed so far. Banks will remain shut today as well. Remember, banks have been shut for 8 straight days now. And the wave of demonstrations is spreading outside the country. The Lebanese people living in France also held rallies near the Eiffel Tower to voice their support. Over 2,000 people gathered at the French capital.
En tant que Libanais en France, nous sommes ici pour supporter nos camarades libanais qui sont au Liban en train de faire une révolution contre les politiciens qui, ça fait des années qu'ils sont sur leur trône, assis au Liban, à voler l'argent du peuple libanais, et des citoyens libanais qui travaillent dur pour essayer de survivre dans un pays où toute la vie est beaucoup plus chère que ce qu'on gagne.
And also the rising cost of living, alleged corruption by officials and high unemployment have plagued the people of Lebanon. All this amidst an economic crisis. The protesters are demanding the resignation of all political leaders and an end to the sectarian system of governance. The government announced an emergency reform package this week, but it has failed to diffuse the unrest. And also the Lebanese Shia majority areas have been criticizing Hezbollah for not doing enough to confront the government. But in reality, there is very little that the Hezbollah can actually do against the government at this point of time. The Hezbollah shares, remember, a crucial alliance with Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri, which has been forged to preserve stability and security across the nation. Remember, the massive protest began on the 17th of October following the government's plans to impose new taxes on goods such as tobacco, petrol and even, believe it or not, WhatsApp calls. The government hurriedly had reversed its tax proposals, but it was by then too late to stop the public anger. Now, the size and the geographic reach of these protests have been extraordinary in a country where political movements have long been divided along sectarian lines and struggle to draw nationwide appeal.